everybody, it's Wallguy, and it's time for the second episode in my new mini-series on how to become good at online FPS games. If you missed episode 1 and you want to catch up to where we are at this early stage in the series, feel free to check out the link up there in the right-hand corner. In episode 1, we covered step 1 of my tips to become better at online FPS games, and today we'll be moving on to step 2 and hopefully beyond. But before that, I want to follow up a little bit on a topic that I covered a little briefly in one of my recent videos, and that is the topic of, well, we've been using the AK-47 with scope for a long time, and I had mentioned that, well, we might be making a change soon. It almost run its course. We'd almost learned everything we really wanted to learn from it, and I might be moving on to a new weapon. So I've been fiddling around with a few weapons to see which one I wanted to look into, and I seem to be settling on the M16, and that seems to be most people's favorite gun in the rifleman class, and they use it a lot more than the AK-47, which I've been using frequently. So I'm going to get into it and see what they like so much about it, and you might see it a lot more for the foreseeable future. I don't anticipate I'll be using it nearly as much as I use the AK-47, because part of using the AK-47 was to master the rifleman class, and I feel I've gotten what I needed to out of that goal. So now I'll just be focusing on mastering the M16 itself, which, you know, it'll be a while, but it won't be anywhere near the 80 to 100 hours I put into learning the AK-47 and the rifleman class. Alright, now in step 1, I talked about the importance of smoothness of graphics versus cranking the graphics up as high as you can. Step 2 is all about control. Controls are extremely important because obviously that's your interface to the whole game. All your success and failure will be determined on what you input when you play. So one of the first things you do when you get a game is get into the controls menu. Not only to see what buttons do what, but to see what you can do, period. You know, I've played this game, and periodically people say things like, what's the button for melee, or how do I use my offensive support action? Well, that's something you find in the controls menu. You really need to get in there and figure that stuff out, because if you can't do everything that you're allowed to do in this game, if you don't even know what button to press, you're never going to get to do it. You need to have an instant reflex memory type of knowledge of all the controls in the game, so whenever you think it, you can do it. But this ties into another problem with controls, because a lot of you play lots of other games. You might play Battlefield 3 or Counter-Strike or any other number of games, and a lot of them might be in a singular genre of FPS, and with all these different games having their own different controls, it's easy for your reflex memory to get a little bit confused when you're playing and switching between many different games. This also relates to another problem in that developers sometimes come up with the craziest, stupidest button layouts by default. All buttons that you use in a game frequently should be easily accessible without moving your hand too much or straining or reaching. You should be able to easily access any button you need. Medal of Honor, for example, has the offensive and defensive support actions set up by default on buttons 5 and 6. Now, a lot of you may have just accepted that as, oh, well, that's the controls, I'm going to learn them, and you might do that with all the controls. And but if you think about it, that's really not a comfortable button to press. I mean, you might have gotten used to it over time, and maybe it feels okay to you now, but go ahead and look at your hand move to buttons 5 and 6 when you press it. That's a lot of distance to cover. If you placed offensive and defensive support actions somewhere closer to your hand's central location, if you could just do a support action with kind of a flick of a finger without even really moving or thinking about it, you're going to get off before your opponent does, basically. Look at the stupid placement of the melee button, for fuck's sake. They put the default melee button as X, which means you've got to take your finger off of running forward to knife someone, and most of the time you're running forward when you want to knife someone. Now, you can get around that by doing some finger gymnastics and, you know, tweaking your hand a little bit, and then you can still run forward while doing it, but why go to all that strain when you can simply assign the melee button to something that's easy to press, like F, for instance. I mean, that's what me and Meowth use, and that way we can have all movement and just roll our index finger over just a little bit, and boom, you've got the melee while on the run, while moving, while turning, while doing anything that you would do without even thinking about it. All of this ties together neatly into my main point of this, and that is customize your controls. Look at the controls, look at the functions, know what you're going to use, and then set up the controls how you want them so that they're most convenient for you. Set up your controls to be similar across all games you play that are similar enough in the genre. Meowth and I do this, and it allows us to get rid of any kind of weird reflex memory issues when switching between games. We have a standard place where we put our melee and grenades and aim down sight and switch weapons and all those things. We also have standard places for alternative weapon use, like offensive and defensive support actions. So when we move on to another game that, say, doesn't have support actions, but it probably has something else that they put in there to mix things up that has a similar use pattern to offensive and defensive support actions. So those secondary function buttons that we have set up as kind of a template, they fill in nicely for those other games, and it just works. When doing this, don't forget your mouse sensitivity. You want it to feel the same across all the titles you play. What I like to do is use my mouse pad as a measuring tool. Now, if you saw my hardware video, you know that my mouse pad and my mouse area is very small. It's less than 8 inches wide. So what I do is I take my mouse and I move it all the way to the left side of the mouse pad, and then I pick a point on the screen to look at, and I start doing a perfect horizontal slide until my mouse, the right side of my mouse, reaches the right side of the mouse pad. While I'm doing this, I watch the number of rotations, the number of times I pass that initial starting point, and I count that up to the exact same number across all the titles I play, so my rotations are always exactly the same, and my sensitivity matches across all the games I play. Doing all of this provides you a great advantage whenever starting a new fighter, like I'm going to be doing with Medal of Honor Warfighter. You go in there pretty much already knowing how to handle the controls, knowing how to play. Yeah, there's gameplay scenarios you've got to learn and how the game actually works, but isn't it nice to not have to think about what button to press? I sure think so. There's one more quick, very important thing I want to tell you about your mouse controls, and it'll definitely help you with your aiming precision. And what you need to do is go into your control panel on your computer and find your mouse properties, and when you're in there, click on the pointer options and uncheck the box that says Enhance Pointer Precision, and click OK and be done with it. What this changes is it makes your mouse movements all work on a 1-to-1 ratio. What this means is when you move your mouse, once you get used to it, you'll know exactly how much movement to expect from your cursor each time you move your mouse. Without doing this, your mouse cursor will do different things depending on how much acceleration or deceleration you're using when moving your mouse around, and that makes your accuracy be slightly different every time you take a shot. You want consistency. Be careful, this isn't only a Windows issue. A lot of games have features called mouse smoothing and such that also do the same thing. You want those features turned off. I will see you all later.